the more you can carve out the ability for them to work in their zone of genius, the more beneficial it is for everybody else, right? And so, like, especially if you have a good salesperson, you want to get everything else out of their way and just allow them to do that because it's beneficial for everybody involved.
How do you find the will to fight back against a world that wants to keep you sedated, average, and stuck in place? Join us for the tools and strategies you need to create a life of abundance, discipline, and high achievement. This is the Tactical Empire with Jeff Smith.
Welcome to another edition of the Tactical Empire. I am joined today with one of the most thoughtful entrepreneurs that I've had the opportunity to chop it up with in the last few years, and Derek Batman with Lucid Branding Solutions. How are you, Derek? How are you?
I'm wonderful, Jeff, and I appreciate the lead in here. Yeah, we have had some great conversations in the past.
Yeah, man, you're totally like chill and cerebral, and it's always interesting to talk with you because I'm like high energy, go, 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 and it's always interesting to watch you process what I'm just dumping on you and then what you come back with because you're a very thoughtful interviewer, question asker. Like I was on your podcast a year ago, whatever, 6 months ago, and you literally, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass because you're on the show. You're one of the most thoughtful interviewers that I've had the opportunity to be on a podcast with, and it's because you take your craft seriously. I watch you do this in business. I mean, you've been a part of the Tactical Empire. I've seen the way that you take things very seriously and run professional opportunities and then try to run them up as fast as you can. And it's been interesting to watch you come from the gym space and then get into this marketing space and start Lucid Branding Solutions. And initially it was pay-per-click or whatever, as far as Facebook ads and stuff like that. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but and then it's now evolved into where you're a full service shop as far as like an agency, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, first off, thank you for the kind words. I think my my ability to question, ask, and do it effectively is just me feeding my own desire for like deep curiosity in the world. But like with everything else, or with everything, there's every strength, has its shadow, and it has led me to, my curiosity has led me down some deep rabbit holes sometimes, more productive than others. But nonetheless, it's been a fun journey. But yeah,
Awesome.
so
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about like why you started the marketing company, or what brought Lucid to the forefront for you and made you decide like I need another business.
for sure. Yeah. So I was running Hard Bet Athletics, a strength and conditioning facility. At this point, it was probably, 10 years and change. And marketing and advertising was something that was always a giant thorn in my side and a pain in my ass for the majority of our existence. There was, you saw these different strategies kind of come and go. Hormozy got into the space. There was like the New You challenge for New Year's, and like there was a lot of agencies that there came this kind of like gold mine of an opportunity in like 2016 range, where like everyone and their grandmother realized they could start an agency, a marketing agency, and get people leads for like $1 a piece or less, right? And it was just like, it was the absolute Wild West. Targeting was incredibly granular. Like you could get super detailed as far as like who you wanted the ads to reach, because there wasn't all these iOS updates that had screwed up that, and the algorithm was much better. So it was like the gold mine of the ages as far as like Facebook ads went. And I got taken advantage of not once but twice during that time in trying to work with some local ad agencies. I don't know that either of them necessarily had malintent. I would like to believe that they really just didn't know what they were doing. So I got to a point where I was like, F it, like I'm going to learn this myself. As painstaking as it is, as much as I got into the gym space because I love being a coach. Like through and through, and I still love being a coach. Just to give you an idea, like I still write all of the programming for my strength and conditioning facility, and that is like pretty low on the hierarchy list as far as like stuff that the owner at this level or CEO should be doing. But like I just thoroughly enjoy it.
Yep.
And I started doing a deep dive into the marketing stuff. So I'd learn on YouTube, learn from different resources, different mentors, putting the pieces together. And then it got to a point where, I was able to generate good lead flow, even when Facebook was underperforming compared to what it used to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And being in networks with a ton of gym owners, you are an asset if you know how to get the bodies in the door and leads into the system. So people started inquiring and, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I would just provide free help. And that led to people basically asking me, like, can you just run my ads? And it reminded me of when I used to do like specialty programming for athletes and not charge. And then I got to a point where I was like, I'm programming like 6 to 8 hours a week. This is ridiculous. Like I need to charge for this. So I started a business, and it started out by me just running Facebook ads for other gym owners.
I love it. I love it, man. And so what's been the evolution? How old is Lucid?
Lucid is about 1.5 years. So I started Lucid about 2 months before my daughter was born. So it would have been January of 2023.
Sure. Because nobody says, hey, let's have a first kid and like we should just start a business right now while you're in your third trimester.
Yeah, that's a fun conversation to have with your wife. When you're already like a busy individual and you're like, oh, by the way, I have this idea that I'm going to put together.
Yeah, I started a business. We got married, started a business, and had our first kid in the same year. And Kirsten's got some war stories about that. And so it's always interesting timing. We don't think it through sometimes, but so what's the trajectory for where Lucid's going? Because it seems like you're really focused on it now with your strength and conditioning facility being so, I guess, mature at this point that it really is cranking along on its own. It's got a lot of brand recognition in the area. Like it seems to be doing well. Your focus seems to be with growing and expanding this particular agency. And so where are you trying to take things?
Yeah, I mean, so the gym is as close to turnkey as it's going to get, with me still being very passionate about that space. I mean, I tell people I'm very transparent about the fact that like at this point, my number one priority with the gym is to just continue to give professional opportunities to the people that deserve it, who are my coaches, right? And my staff. Like that is bar none number one responsibility that I feel towards the gym as it relates to Lucid. So what we found was that advertising at a local level for brick and mortar businesses is a fickle game. There's so many inputs and outputs that you have to and variables that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at performance and what the outcomes are for these businesses, and in this case gyms. And across the board, we collect as much data as we possibly can to make informed decisions around how to better advertise for these gyms to get them a better return. And there was effectively a giant cliff in their sales funnel at the set point, where we would get these gyms, on average anywhere from like 75 to 200 leads, depending on what their ad spend was. And just for the audience, for anyone that's not, in a space where they understand like set, show, and close rates in a CRM, which is client relationship management software, effectively what happens is a lead comes into the system and it enters the funnel. And then there is a point where you get someone to set an appointment, you get someone to show to set appointment, and then you get that person to close. And this works similar in the like e-commerce space, but it's just tracking through, did they add it to cart, right? Did they actually make the purchase, and so on. So set rate is where the lead comes in and you're getting them to just agree to come to an appointment at the gym, which in this case is a consultation, or some people refer to it as a no sweat intro. and we would notice there was just this massive drop off. So we would get them, 100 leads, let's say, and then it would be like only like 13 people or 18 people would agree to even set an appointment. So what we did is we started doing some investigating, and we would talk to the gym owners and their staff and look at their processes as it related to their nurture or lead nurture. And we would, we'd always start with like, if you had to rate your lead nurture, how would you say you guys are? And people would be like, oh, like we do a pretty good job. Like if it was out of a 5, I'd say like a 4. So I'd inquire, you mentioned that I'm good at question asking, and it's like, all right, like I want to know more. So I'd
Yep.
be like, okay, like what are the hours in which somebody is being contacted? Like, well, we have automations that go out all day. I'm like, okay, cool, that's helpful. We can definitely look at those and see how we could manipulate those to increase your conversion rate here. But how often is a live human either dialing these leads as they come in? And then what's that time to response look like? And they'd be like, well, we have, Seth works from 1 to 3 p.m. and then that's it. And I'd be like, okay, so like what happens if a lead comes in at 8? And they're like, well, the automations would take care of them. I'm like, got it. Okay, cool. So there's like major gaps. And we were finding this to be true across the board for all of the gyms that we were working with. Best case scenario, you were looking at maybe half the day was being, and this is like the best gyms that we worked with, half
Yep.
of the day there was a live human to be able to handle this. And here's where it gets really, really tricky, is that a lot of the time it was the gym owner. So it's like the gym owners are being inundated with their phones pinging from their CRM software being like, lead came in. And so they would develop this resentment around the fact that they had to deal with this. And many of these people are unresponsive or are hard to get a hold of. And it's like the last thing that the gym owner wants to be dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we decided to do was we looked at 2 options. We looked at going the AI route, where we would effectively plug in AI to be able to better communicate with these people, and use some like logical reasoning webs, if you will, to help problem solve and work through objections. Through all of the testing that we did, we found it to be fairly ineffective, especially as conversations led astray from like the typical yes no type answers. The minute there was nuance and subjectivity, AI's turned into effectively like a labyrinth. I tell people to think about like when you call Comcast and it's like, to go back to the main menu, press 1. It started having that effect, and I was like, oh, this is a major turnoff. And then there are even some AI call systems that we tested out, and it was very much the same. I had some people in a double blind basically call the AI software, and I wouldn't tell them whether it was a setter or whether it was AI, and they like 80% of the time knew they were talking to AI. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if they know, then people like these leads are going to know. So
Sure.
I decided to go the other route, which was to basically train a call center. So we hired, onboarded, and trained live human appointment setters to understand the objections they're going to be dealing with these leads, and to set as many appointments as possible. And they're heavily incentivized based on the number of appointments they set.
I love it. I love it. So what kind of numbers are you seeing? So if I get 100 leads, 13 were showing up, what are you seeing as far as improvements for these setters?
Yeah, so right now we've beta tested with my gym and about 2 others. And at this point, we're seeing about a 25% increase in set rate. And I
Okay.
imagine that over time, as we continue to get better, that number's only going to go up and up and up. Because there's an additional piece here, which is those setters are not only calling the leads as they come in, they have pre-existing lead lists from alumni and people that have reached out to the gym in the past. So there's no downtime, right? So let's say I mentioned that like the best gyms are getting somewhere of like 150 plus leads. That's like 3 leads a day, right?
Yep.
So, or whatever, 5 leads a day. So it's like that. If you think about it, if there's a setter for an 8-hour period, there's so much downtime where they're not making calls. So I was like, we need to fill that time. So whether it's like, Instagram and Facebook outreach, whether it's, contacting alumni, doing like, what's it called? Like reactivation campaigns,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
finding ways to build promotional offers that they could reach out to these leads and just fill their days up, has really increased not even the set rate, what I care more about is the set throughput. So how many set appointments are they getting over the course of a month?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's brilliant though, because I mean, it works in any industry. I own a real estate acquisition company, and we're doing the same thing. And you people don't understand how much money's sitting in their dead lists. Maybe not dead, but like their old lists, their expired lists, things like that. And that is something, having run a gym or owned a gym for 12 years, I understand that like that never happens. Like rarely. Like, do I go shake the bushes of my old or expired list? I mean, we'd run a reactivation campaign once or twice a year, maybe, but to have somebody on staff trying, well, a VA in this case, not on staff, but like beating the bushes for you with dead or expired leads, like all day, every day, is gonna, like, you would not believe the fruit that will fall out of that tree. And you're talking about a significant increase. So like when you're using the numbers 13 leads, now 25% increase, so call it 4 more leads. Like if 4 more leads come with a 70% sales rate, and they sell 2.5 more memberships every day or every week, that's like, let's call it somewhere between 200 and $600 per person. And so like a $1,200 weekly swing on like MMR or MRR, and like over a year's period, you extrapolate that, and holy shit, man, it's like a huge game changer. And most gym owners would die for like 4 or 5 more leads, but we're doing the same thing in my real estate acquisition company. I mean, we've got ongoing new leads that we're generating all the time, so they're working on those. But then we're going to old lists that were expired, and we're recontacting those people to see if anything's changed in their lives. And fitness is the same exact way as finances. Like, you don't know when you're going to reach the person and if they're receiving your message properly. So 3 months later, 90 days from now, you call me about getting in shape, and I might be at a completely different place, and like, yes, I need this right now. So like the fact that you're staying top of mind with that churn, you're going to reach them at some point when they're receptive to your offer. And so like that is super powerful for an owner to have that working in the background constantly. What a benefit. What a benefit.
Yeah, and two things I'd like to mention here. So, you brought up the benefit of the outreach with these people. What happens to a lot of them is they currently, without a setter, get parked into these like long-term nurture workflows, and the gym owners just kind of like will inundate them with lead magnets and basic information and at-home workouts, right? And then eventually, the majority of them will choose to opt out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're having someone actually calling, letting them know what's going on at the gym, and like trying to get them in the door, it's like the value of that lead goes up like precipitously when you move them into a position where they're going to come in for a no sweat intro, compared to like, just be at the other end of a text getting free information. And that stuff can be valuable, but I feel like it's it's not a place that a lot of gym owners place a lot of their time and energy, is in like actually thinking through the long term, strategy as far as contacting these people and making sure that they have the information necessary to like warm them up over the course of time. So just having someone that can actually get on the phone and make the dials to them is just immensely valuable. The
Yeah.
other thing I was going to
Oh, go
mention
ahead.
really
Sorry.
really quick is that we also, so when the setter gets paired with a gym, they are always working with that gym. So it's not like it's different people working for one particular facility. And we go into the depths as far as like, they know the owners' names, they know the coaches' names, they know the street that it's on, they know the landmarks nearby, they know like what the offers are, we have the gym owners do a video of the space, they understand the client avatar. So like they really take the time to do the research necessary to understand all the ins and outs of the gym. And I tell the gym owners that my goal is to have this person on the phone. Like if a lead's calling, or they're on the phone with a lead, I want that lead to believe that this person is sitting inside of your facility.
Sure. That's fascinating. That, because that's so necessary. Because I mean, I've been a part of marketing campaigns in the past, or even as an end user, as a customer, and you call this person, and or they call you and they're trying to warm you up, and it's obvious that they don't know anything about the facility that they're dealing with, or the business that they're dealing with. So like that's incredibly important. And that, I mean, the other thing I was going to say is that like when you bring these people back with an actual personal touch, like let's say I'm on a, a cold list, and it's been 6 months and you actually physically call me and the timing is right for me. So I would say that your close rate is tremendous on these recapture campaigns, because I'm not calling to fuck around anymore. Like, because like at that point, I'm like, oh, you called me for a reason. And if I say yes, if it's not a hard no or like, thanks, guys, I'll catch you in 6 months. Like, if I say yes at that point in time, my likelihood of closing is much higher, because now I have been sitting on the fence for 6, 9 months for this thing. You called me at the right time. I'm not coming in to get information anymore. I'm coming in to buy. And so, like, I could see that. So, when we talk about the 25% increase while you're shaking the trees, like, those people are going to close at a higher rate. They're likely going to close at a higher rate. I bet you'll find this data over time, that than the people that come from the original lead lists, for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm really interested. There's so much of this that I'm able to make some estimates based on what's going on in other industries. So what I've created exists in the med spa space. I've seen some versions of it in the gym world, but it's not super common.
Mm.
If I had to take a guess as to why, I think it's because running a call center is like a completely separate business. Like it has its own constraints, problems, difficulties. So I think that would be why. But this does exist elsewhere, which is how I kind of base the model off of,
Yep.
at least the foundation of it. So I'm really fascinated to see, like you said, there's going to be some things that we expect, and there's going to be some things that surprise us in the data as it comes through, over the next 6 months or so.
So, what do you find the biggest headache, hurdle, obstacle you're facing in standing this service up is?
Um, well, I mean, out of the gates, I had to go through a hiring spree before we even launched, because we needed to have we need to have a director in a position that would manage all of the appointment setters. We needed to run the financials to understand what would make this viable for us and then make sense for the gym owners. We had to onboard and train all of the appointment setters before we had any gyms that agreed to do this. Right. So this was there was a lot of upfront elbow grease and risk that went into this. But we can get into this more. Like I this is my biggest role in all of my businesses, is like when I get a hunch, I sell it to the team and I'm like, we're going all in on this. And because I saw the numbers from over the last year and a half of working with gyms, and knowing that this was one of the biggest points of frustration for gym owners, was not only the low set rate, but also having to deal with all of the techs. And as we know, like, leads coming off of Facebook are fickle. They're not the warmest. So it is a process. Like, it takes work to converse with these people, and most gym owners don't want to do this, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say those were the biggest constraints up front. But I had my eyes on the prize, and I knew that this was something that was going to bring value to a lot of gym owners, because I knew, look, what's something that made this so simple is, like, I knew that it would bring a ton of value to my gym, because I don't do the lead nurture, but my GM was. And I was like, what if all she had to do was sell? Or what if all she had to do was do coaching and team development? It's like, that's really where I want her time and resources and energy being spent, not texting back and forth with people at all odds and ends of the day.
Yep. 100%. 100%. The more you can carve out the ability for them to work in their zone of genius, the more beneficial it is for everybody else, right? And so, like, especially if you have a good salesperson, you want to get everything else out of their way and just allow them to do that, because it's beneficial for everybody involved. Um, So you've niched really hard into the fitness space with this particular call center. Like at this time, right? You see it being replicated across different industries, certainly. Is that a plan for the future?
Yeah, so actually, it was like one of my biggest selling points to the team, because generally what happens, as far as the dynamic between me and my team, is like I'm definitely the visionary, and then I hire integrators and implementers underneath of me. And my two kind of like key players in both businesses, when I brought this to their attention, like this is how what we're gonna do. Uh, there's always this kind of like interesting dynamic of like I'm like, this is what I want to do. And they go, you have no idea how much work that's going to take for us to build all this out and like get all that integrated. And I go, I understand, but we're doing it. And they go, okay, it's going to take 3 months. And I go, make it take 45 days. Right. So it's like this constant back and forth. With that, part of the reason I was able to sell this as far as an idea of what we were going to put our time and energy into was because of the fact that it can literally be copy and pasted into so many different industries very easily, because of the fact that really the biggest change would come through the automations and the training of the setters.
Uh-huh.
But there's businesses like med spas that are just adjacent to gyms where we could, my team would argue with me, but like we could pivot or start a second pod, if you will, and work in the med spa space. I think within like 3 months to 6 months, we could build this. We could totally replicate what we do for gyms in another industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that too. I'm sure you could. That's where my brain goes with it too. So you're not alone on that. Because it really is just about training at that point. And like 75-80% of your operations are exactly the same.
Yeah, and
And
I'll look at CAC to LTV over time with the gym space, and as long as it's within a ratio that I find is going to be scalable, and is continuing to fuel me the way that I need it to, and not be a pain in my butt, then I'll keep building the gym space. I think there's a ton of room to grow. In that realm alone, like I'm part of some marketing masterminds, and there are multiple people that are in the gym space doing well over 100K a month, and they're just doing ads. So like
yeah,
there's plenty of room to grow with this, and I don't think we're anywhere near our ceiling at the moment. So
well, I think there's an apprehension in that industry to like spend on these things that are core business functions. And so like I agree with you 100%. It's I wouldn't say it's a blue ocean, but it's a pseudo blue ocean as far as like, which takes me into my next question. And like, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people in the boutique fitness space make is that they're not willing to spend money to operationally support the business that they want, and because they can't see it, right? Like you
Mhm.
see these gyms doing $250,000 a year, and if you try to tell them that making $100,000 a month, they can't fit that into their brain. Like, and so how to get there is exactly what you're talking about. It's reinvesting in the business, putting in operations and structure, and then scaling it, right? And and for them that sounds like it's 100 miles off of anything that they want. So instead they they keep this mindset of like, I'm real happy here, I'm making 20 grand a month gross, and I can carve off whatever 30% profit off of that, and we can live off of it. And what you're creating, and you and I talked about this offline, is that you are helping gym owners, and that the more you can help them, it's fulfilling to you. And what I think you're providing is a window into a complete, like, what they deserve. And I think
Mm.
that's what people don't provide in the boutique gym space, to be fair. I think that all too often these guys are encouraged to eke out another 5% gain and then try to hold on to 35% profit at the end of the day, which only leads them to making six figures eventually and like that's the panacea of like business ownership. And you and I both know the suffering that goes into getting there in a boutique gym is fucking incredible, because unlike many other industries, the ceiling is pretty low usually in the fitness space. Like the gym's doing 100 grand a month is fantastic, right? But like if you're trying to get to like $100,000 of take home a month, you're talking about having to scale into multiple locations, 5, 6 gyms to do that. And it's a bigger organization. And most people just aren't interested in that. So if your model can come into a single facility and allow it to scale to 800,000 of gross revenue to 1.5 of gross revenue, and keep the profit ratio somewhere between 25 and 30%, like now you're talking about somebody, a business owner that gets to take home, instead of fucking $90,000, they get to take home three, four, $500,000. And we've been in the community long enough that most people can't wrap their head around that type of take home, and which is understandable. But these business owners that are out here doing it for the love of what they're doing should be financially rewarded at some point. And so like you're providing that bridge to where like what I would perceive as life-changing money for a lot of these people.
So just for clarity's sake, when I was referring to the 100,000, it was in regards to other agencies that work within the gym space. But what I can speak to is there are some prerequisites that we require before working with a gym. And then there's, places, mentorship programs that we would refer them out to in the case that they're not prepared to work with us. Because like the last thing I want to do is be just another agency owner for gyms that is going to come in and convince them that I'm going to save their business and, rescue them from going bankrupt or, having to work 80 hours a week. And that is just simply not the case. Advertising and marketing can be have a massive benefit for gyms that are prepared, and it can create a terribly expensive mess for gyms that are not. So 100%. For us, like we only work with gyms that are profitable. We only work with gyms that have advertised before in some capacity. They have to have their metrics dialed, and we take a look at them to make sure that they do. They have to have some sort of a CRM system in place, and if not, they have to be willing to use ours. We also set expectations early on that this is a learning process that takes collaboration, like a collaborative effort between the two of us over time. And there's going to be a learning curve on your end as far as understanding and setting expectations as far as like what it's like to play with cold traffic, understanding the difference between advertising and marketing, being that advertising is what's going to engage with people and get the eyeballs and get them to click on your thing and submit their information. And marketing is just simply the math. It's like money in, money out. It's like looking at the metrics and being unemotional to the amount of leads that came through versus the amount of people that bought. So as long as that money exceeds what you had to pay an ad spend and to my team. And I tell people like, you're never going to get rid of problems. Like marketing just exposes new problems. Because if you're not running ads and you have 13 leads come through a month, it's like you have false confidence that you're a good salesperson because every person that's come through is either a referral or has come directly from Google because they looked you up or went directly to your website. These are hot leads. So when you start having conversations via text or over the phone, and getting people in the door and they immediately present you with objections and you freeze like a deer in headlights, it's like, it's okay. Like these are problems that we will solve together and work through over time. But I pitched this from the very beginning. I'm like, we are not a gym rescue company. Like we are not here to take your gym from like you making no money to making a ton of money and you just get to sit back and do nothing. Like there's work involved in this process.
Sure. I'm glad you took it there because that was my very next question. Like, who's your target avatar that you're looking for as far as a gym owner? So you've answered a bunch of those questions, but like, let's go deeper on it because what you're talking about is kind of like where you're coming in as a partnership, if you will. And so it's set up to be a long-term relationship where there's learning on both sides. There's investment on both sides. And so is there a financial, like threshold that you need them to be at? as far as like how much income they're bringing in, gross income, ad spend, like, because there's obviously ad spend bolted on the front end of this.
Yeah. So I mean, the threshold for ad spend is that they have to minimally spend. And again, this is market dependent. If you're a gym in the middle of like LA or like Manhattan, you're going to be looking at 2 to 3x this recommendation. But we generally say that they have to spend at least a minimum of $750 a month. We do not want them to spread that across platforms. So, we do Facebook and Instagram and Google ads as well. But like, we don't want them to take $200 and do Facebook and
Yep.
$200 and do Instagram, right? So 750 generally we start with Facebook and then work from there. Um, and yeah, so as far as like ad spend goes, like we try to have them at least to that limit. In regards to revenue and profit and those sort of things, as long as the gym is profitable and they're not borrowing or overexerting themselves to hire us and bring us on,
Yep.
I'm comfortable with working with them. Because I'm sure in your experience with gyms, like there are gyms out there that do 15K a month and the owner takes home 9, and there's gyms that do 50K a month and the owner takes home 3. So top line's not always representative of that. I care
Yep.
more about the profitability of the business.
100%. 100%. Do you guys get into like what? So with this conversation of like, this is an investment on my side and your side, do you get into like where they want to take their gym, or is there like goal setting, or like what here's where I'd like to be in 36 months or 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about it by the numbers, but the other place that we go with it is like, you know, I always have the conversation of like, what do you actually enjoy within the advertising and marketing space for your gym, and like where can we get the most bang for your buck? So like, for instance, it's like if and I'll talk about this in the context before we had these appointment setters come on board. Basically, it's like, if someone says like, hey, like lead quality hasn't been the greatest recently, right? And it's like, okay, well, you've got two options. One option is that you can have someone be more dedicated to making the calls, having the text, right? Learning how to have the right conversations and ask the appropriate questions to incentivize someone to get in here, right? So you can pour energy into that. Or you can pump your energy into creating content, right? Because if the leads, quote unquote, are bad quality, right? In this instance, it's like they need to be warmed up somehow. So they're either going to be a lead, and then you're going to put them through a workflow where you send them a bunch of proof of concept and authority, or that stuff exists on your website and your landing pages and your social media profiles, to where now that problem starts to become solved. So I think obviously long term we want them to do all of this, right? Because in
Sure.
essence this is what makes the brand,
Yep.
builds the whole like people like us do things like this type of persona for the leads that are inquiring.
Yep.
But out of the gates, it's kind of like you have to choose your battles, right? It's like you can't not want to create content and not want to pour time and energy into lead nurture and hope the leads get better. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we got to pick one here. So I think that getting like directionally focused with the owners is one of the first things that I like to do.
Okay. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm going to throw one at you that's going to test your resolve right now. So we're going to finish with this, but um so you're interviewing me. I'm a gym owner. I'm in your target avatar, but I haven't produced I'm not quite there financially, let's say. So it, imagine you're telling me I'm not a qualified candidate yet, but like, what do I need to do over the next 90 days to prep my business if I'm right on the threshold to come into your company? So I want some tips and tricks for people that are not spending with you yet to prepare to be ready for this. Because I mean, sales is obviously, you look through the whole sales process end to end on the chain. There could be breaks anywhere. So if you're talking to me, what do I need to do if I'm going to hire you, Derek, in the next 60 days? And you're like, okay, Jeff, great. Like, here's your checklist of what you should be working on.
Okay. So we can break it into buckets. So bucket one, content. So I would say put more energy into creating member interviews, getting candid photos of members engaging and interacting outside of class, preferably wearing bright color clothes. If they can be wearing things that are semi-matching, it works really well, be it organically or paid. I would say doing things that prove authority. So like coaching demonstrations, pictures of coaches working with clients, and just posting with a frequency where people know that you are alive and active and a professional. So that's one bucket that people can pour into. And I always tell people, like, if you pick something you like. So like if you like talking and having conversations, start a podcast, right? If you like writing, it's like uh, do a blog or make content posts where it's just a picture and you can write underneath. Like find something that you can do where you remove the friction because there's a level of enjoyment there.
Yep.
The other bucket would be in metrics. So depending on how buttoned up those things are, I will give gyms a list of metrics that you should be able to calculate these consistently on a monthly basis. If you don't have member management software or a CRM that allows you to do that, you're going to have to do it on spreadsheets. And we do have some examples of things that we can send to them in the case that they need those things. And then lastly is get really dialed on like what your roles and responsibilities are, because there's a good chance that if they are not profitable enough or in a position to be able to afford us, that the gym owner is still wearing multiple hats and they don't have someone that is specialized in the appropriate areas, be it a setter or a closer, or manager, or content creator. So finding the right people to get into the right places in the gym, and training them appropriately would be the other bucket.
Yep. Yep. Sit down and do an end-to-end sales cycle on a whiteboard, like from end to end, who handles each portion of it, each task along the way, and see how good and effective you are at each level of the cycle for sure. Because the biggest thing I see and the biggest thing I've experienced is having a broken sales cycle and fucking pouring money into marketing. So I'm getting a bunch of leads, but my sales cycle's broken, and it was broken in house. And I think that's most people's problem, because if you talk to anybody, they're like, I want more leads, more leads, more leads, and like usually that's not the issue.
Yeah, and I want to add a quick point here on this is like I have being getting into the agency space where I'm in masterminds specifically for marketers, and seeing the availability of closers and like having to hire one for Lucid. I have completely reset my standards as far as like what a good salesperson, like the qualities of a really good salesperson. I think there's a lot of gym owners, and I was this way too, whether it be themselves or their manager. They think they're great at sales, and then when you meet someone that's actually great at sales, they've been through all the courses and they've put in the reps. When I say reps, I mean like you should see the sales calendars of a busy salesperson. Like you're talking like 20 to 40 appointments on the low end a week, where they're in discovery calls, they're in demos, and then they're watching the tape. Like during their downtime, they are watching what went well, what didn't go well, what objection was I not prepared for, and then they're going back to the drawing board and working within their networks of salespeople to how to overcome these things. Gyms just don't have a good consensus of like what a good salesperson actually is.
I love that. I love that, because you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And most people, like, people shouldn't take offense to that. So when you say gym, like, that's the problem. Most people are like, well, fuck you. And instead of being like, well, what can I learn here? And so like, how do we stretch and we professionalize what we're doing? And I think that like that is so important to understand, because like
There's just levels. Listen, there's just levels to it. And I'm not
yeah,
saying that you need to have someone on your staff that's trained to be able to go sell cranes at $1 million a pop, right?
sure.
Like they don't need to train to that degree. But the point being is that there's a huge delta there, which means that there is improvements that can be had, which, let's put it this way, of there are some gyms we work with and it becomes very apparent early on that they have a killer closer. And when they do, it makes everyone's life way easier. And
Yep.
here's the ironic part is if that closer leaves, that gym feels that impact immensely.
Yep.
Because it is not the easiest to find a closer that wants to come in and plug into a gym. Why? Because the commission is nowhere near what they can get elsewhere.
Sure.
And like that's part of the battle here.
Yep. Yep. I mean, a talented salesperson can write their own salary, any
Oh
number they
yeah.
want, any number they want. They can work wherever they want. They can do a variety of things. And most people don't understand that and can't conceptualize it because they're like, well, I started the business. I'm the best salesperson here. And like, there's a whole world out there of people that are specifically trained in these things. And yeah, it's wild.
There
So,
are salespeople right now that have a calendar with 50 appointments on it for $100,000 mastermind this week, and they
yeah,
make 7 to 12% commission on that. Right. So
yep,
like just, I mean, you do the math.
right.
Like,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can make millions a year, like 1099 salesperson, easy. Wild, dude. Okay, this has been good, and I love what you're doing because I think like the level of sophistication and professionalism that you're bringing to the industry is something that I think is necessary. And the more people that bump up that can afford what you're doing, that are at the level that you're looking for, let's call it a 25% upper echelon of the boutique studios. Like I would love to see more people watch what that 25% is doing and then aspire to get there and bump themselves up into that category. Because like I said earlier, I mean, it's a necessary piece of the business. And so I love what you're doing in the fitness space, man. You're changing lives, you're helping entrepreneurs. So congratulations on it, and congratulations with the family and everything you've got going, man. I'm happy for it. Any last pieces of advice you'd like to send us out on?
I would just say find a way to enjoy what you do. Like that's I constantly think about that. Like how can I move my schedule around and build my days so that like at the end of the day I reflect back and I'm like I had a good time today. I think that's paramount with this stuff because it's easy to get lost in the vanity metrics, whether it be the six pack in fitness or the dollar signs in business. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, you got to love it.
100% makes it easier to do each day too. Well, Derek, thank you for your time. Great to catch up with you, man. Like I said, I love what you're doing with Lucid Branding Solutions. How can people find you?
They can go to our website, lucidbrandingsolutions.com. I am Coach Batman, Coach period Batman on Instagram. So yeah, feel free to shoot me a message, reach out. Worst case scenario, we can just chop it up about gym stuff.
He is not hard to find, folks. Well, I appreciate your time, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.